Hello, it's time for the fifth grade story, our last great story for the year. Last time, for the fourth grade story, we heard about the beginning of spoken and written language. How did humans communicate with each other? Well, for our final great story, we'll hear how humans communicated with numbers. How did they keep track of dates? So, without further ado, the fifth grade story. So, a very, very long time ago, early humans learned how to live on Earth. They learned how to find food and objects to help them survive. They especially learned how to do things faster, like using horses for transportation rather than walking. One of the most important things human did, which set them apart from other animals, was their ability to communicate and think in complicated ways, which was what they did with words and then writing. So if you remember, here's that cuneiform writing. A long time ago, while humans were working on writing, they were also learning how to count and communicate numbers. Probably the first humans used their fingers to help them count. Counting would have been really important for talking about food. Perhaps a person saw four little apples on a tree and went back and showed four fingers to their family to tell them how many they saw. Maybe another saw three big animals that could be hunted and showed fingers while making gestures to show that three things were big. Humans also learned how to draw picture words to explain things, which was good if you had to leave a message for someone. Imagine, though, having to draw a picture of five nests with three eggs in each nest. That would take a long time, especially if you were in a hurry. What would have happened, though, if an early human saw a huge pack of wolves and wanted to warn people? By the time the early humans had drawn pictures of the wolves to show how many there were, they might be too close. Hmm. So they maybe had to think of a faster way to communicate those kind of numbers. Maybe this early human came up with a faster way of communicating numbers and made 25 straight lines to show that there were 25 wolves. If others knew the lines represented one, this would have been a much quicker way to share big numbers. Drawing lines was certainly a faster way of communicating big numbers. But what about when a person had to share about 500 fish or 243 antelopes or wanted to divide 5,000 nuts amongst members of their community? So even though early humans only had the number one, they still had ways of remembering how many things they had. That would be important if you were sharing out the nuts, like I was talking about just a little bit ago. They used sticks. They would carve small lines in the sticks to show how many of something they had. Maybe they even had a different stick to show how many of something they needed. So they would carve those little lines in the stick. A long time passed with these ways of counting. Then the ancient Egyptians came up with a way to say 10 of something. It looked like an upside down U shape. So think of the change this would have made to people. So now they can communicate numbers in groups of 10 instead of one. Soon the ancient Egyptians figured out how to make symbols for 100, 1,000, 10,000, even 100,000. They even had a symbol for 1 million, which looked like a human holding up their arms out. It's kind of like this. To probably say that this number, so this like symbol, probably says that this number is so big. We don't even really know what that looks like. So they needed numbers to measure things like the Nile River or their crops. Other civilizations were also working out ways of sharing big numbers. The Babylonians and the Mayans had ways of writing numbers too, but they began to think that there was another number that people should care a lot about. They tried out different ways of communicating this number. Have you figured out what this important number is? Zero. You might think zero isn't that important or a real number, but imagine if we didn't have it. How would things be different? It wasn't the Babylonians and Mayans who came up with a symbol for zero, but the Indians. People in India also invented other symbols for communicating numbers. They took their way of counting to their neighbors, the Arabs. The Arabs liked some of the ways the Indians counted, but they changed the way of writing their numerals. The way of writing numbers, which we now call Arabic numerals, is still used in much of the world today. This collection of 10 numbers or symbols meant that any number could be expressed very quickly with just 10 symbols. So here's our numerals: 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Another early civilization created a different way of making numbers. The Romans had letters to stand for numbers. You might have seen them before at the end of a movie or on a clock. They're called Roman numerals. For a long time, Roman numerals were very commonly used because the Romans were so powerful in Europe. Over time, though, the Arabic numbers have become the most common that we've used. So numbers have helped people with so many things like science, music, and travel. Think about, in what ways do you use numbers in your life? And you'll have your choice board that you can choose to do a follow-up work for this great story. You also have, I'll go ahead and bring that up while we're looking at it. We've got our 5th grade story vocabulary. So our words that we looked at: strokes, like the marks that were made on the stick to show number 1. Communicate. So this communication was happening with letters and words and numbers at the same time. People were coming up with these ways. Counting sticks, what early humans carved symbols in the stick to tell themselves how many things they had killed. Symbols, which were used to represent an object, a place, or an idea. We heard about civilizations, these ancient civilizations, which are society, culture, ways of doing things. We hear about Egypt, Babylon, also China, Mumbai, the Aztecs. The Mayan had their own numeral system that was pretty interesting. To measure is to find the size of something, and counting how much there is by using a tool. We calculate in math. We work out how much of something there is by adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing. A numeral is a figure to show a number. If something is not easy and may have lots of different steps, we say that it's complicated. And then a combination is a mixture of things. So you also have your choice board here for your great story vocabulary words that are on this Padlet. So if you like, you can do a work for each. You can do a work for the vocabulary, a work for just the great lesson story, like making a comic strip of the story, a collage, or answering one of these questions. Is 0 important to counting? Why or why not? Okay. So enjoy this work this week. Enjoy this last great story, and we'll see you next time.